I know that in India there is a problem of denial of history, so it is disputed. Nevertheless, it's a historical reality. It started with the first Muslim naval invasion in 636, which is 4 years after the death of the Prophet. That was repelled. Then there were several more invasions over land that were all repelled. But finally, it is Mohammed bin Qasim who broke through India's defenses in 712 and conquered Sindh, the province of Sindh in present-day Pakistan, which was then characterized by a lot of slaughter and destruction of temples. Then you get the same story with a number of other conquerors like Mahmud Ghaznavi around 1000, Muhammad Ghori in 1192, Malik Kafur, Sikandar Buchi Khan, Timur, Babar, Aurangzeb, Tipu Sultan, and many others. Then even in fairly recent memory, you have the partition slaughter 1947, mostly in West Pakistan. In East Pakistan, it was a bit longer drawn out. There you got a real genocide, I dare say, in 1971, which was stopped by the intervention of the Indian Army. Then even more recently, you have the many cases of terrorism and the expulsion of the Pandits from Kashmir in 1990. And then a lot of, frequent violent riots and terror attacks and the constant petty terror that the Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh have to undergo. So that's very, very, very many people killed. A first discussion is about the fact how many were killed. A figure that is bandied about a lot, I've done it myself, is by Professor K.S. Lal, the historian, who estimated in 1979 that from a study of the demography in the Middle Ages, he concludes that between the year 1000 and 1525, about 80 to 100 million Hindus disappear from the demographic statistics. Now, of course, these demographic statistics for that age are necessarily vague and necessarily can't account for all the factors like famines due to disease and things like that. So this is only an estimate. And at any rate, since 1979, nothing has been added to it. You see, this has not been further studied, partly because in Indian academia, this is not deemed to be a fit object for study. And, well, partly because nobody felt the need to do better. You see, once this figure was around, on the authority of a real academic historian, K.S. Lal, then everybody thought, oh, now we have it. Now we can quote 80 to 100 million. Well, that was an interesting start, but, more work ought to be done on that. So at any rate, it was very large, many millions, no doubt. Like in the 20th century alone, you have a figure approaching the Jewish Holocaust, which was about 5.3 million. So here you have about 2 million in Pakistan in 1947, 2.5 million in East Pakistan, Bangladesh in 1971. That's already very close. It, of course, completely dwarfs the communal violence in India since 1947. You see, there is a story abroad that India is a very dangerous place for the minorities, and that there is a constant threat of the ugly, vicious, overbearing Hindu majority throwing the Muslims into the Indian Ocean, and so on. But in reality, all the communal violence in India combined, both from the Hindu and from the Muslim side, together, is completely dwarfed by the actual killing that happened in Pakistan and in Bangladesh. Anyway, so we know it was large, but was it genocide? That's the question I will focus on. You see, this word is thrown around much too easily. Like, for instance, I remember when at the fag end of his life, the Chilean dictator Pinochet was taken to court by a Spanish judge, Baltasar Garzón. And of course, to just bring a foreign head of state to court, that's not so easy to do. That's against all kinds of international treaties and so on. So to overrule all those limitations, the judge had to accuse Pinochet of genocide. And effectively, at some point in his career, he had killed 3 Spanish activists who had Chile. 3 people, that can never possibly be counted as a genocide. I mean, at least reasonably. So you see there, the word genocide was used as well as a juridical trick. Also didn't lead to anything. But so on that same model, many people rhetorically use the term genocide, and often it is not entirely warranted, even if the killing is very large. And we'll see some examples. So genocide means intentionally targeting a community for destruction. And destruction does not necessarily mean killing. It can also mean preventing procreation. Like, for instance, at this moment, some American NGOs are accusing China of committing genocide on the Uyghur minority in China by sterilizing them or giving them medicine that has a sterilizing effect. Many other NGOs laugh at this, say this is American propaganda. I will not speak out on it. Nevertheless, the fact here is that genocide does not necessarily mean killing. And conversely, of course, killing, even mass killing, does not necessarily mean genocide. Genocide must also be differentiated from ethnic cleansing. Like in Kashmir 1990, the Kashmiri Pandits were thrown out. There was some killing, of course, but that was described by the Pakistanis as killing 1 to expel 100. So there was some killing, enough to create a feeling of terror, of fear, so that they all left. And so they are certainly victims. They are victims of ethnic cleansing, but not exactly of genocide. You see, at no point did the Pakistanis make an intention clear of physically killing all the Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, if they had wanted to do that, they could have. And so their aim was set a little lower. More generally, Islam does not target the physical elimination of any unbeliever community. You see, it wages jihad, it ordains jihad This is not some misunderstanding of some later followers. No, no, this is laid down by Muhammad himself. And the example was given by Muhammad himself, conquering, and then pressurizing or forcing the people to convert to Islam, or to at least recognize Muhammad as their overlord. In the case of Christians and Muslims, much later also extended to Hindus. You could become a dhimmi, that is to say subordinate to Muslim rule, accepting Muslim rule, accepting a number of humiliating conditions, but that way you could survive, but that's on sufferance. Like for instance, in Muhammad's own lifetime, they exiled a Jewish community in Medina to the oasis of Khaybar. At a high price, they extorted half their income, but nevertheless, they could stay there for a while, but it was on Muslim sufferance. And so the day the Muslims said, no, you can't stay anymore, they had to leave Khaybar also. But so, you see, in those very limited conditions, killing was not strictly necessary. So Islam does not set out to kill all unbelievers. In fact, the first generation of Muslims had been unbelievers themselves, had converted to Islam. So Islam is perfectly familiar with the phenomenon that those unbelievers whom you target for war and perhaps for killing, they can convert to Islam, then they are on your side, then you don't have to kill them anymore. So mass killing occasionally happens, but that's only an instrument for this conquest. And Muhammad, you know, by temperament, preferred people to recognize him. That was the most important goal in his life, to be gratified, you know, to be recognized as the prophet by everyone. And so killing people was only a second option. The real goal was to have everybody accept Muhammad's claim to prophecy. So I think it's important to stress this point, that nothing is gained by exaggerations or inaccuracies. On principle, I say truth alone prevails. I haven't invented that myself. That's in the Upanishad, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Indian Republic's national motto. But there's also a strategic circumstance. You know, if you don't care about truth, then at least care about winning. You see, you're not going to win as Hindus if you afford inaccuracies. You see, the enemy can get away with lies, and indeed, the enemy is lying all the time. You know, there's huge anti-Hindu propaganda the world over, mostly fostered precisely by the Indian secularists. But they can get away with this. You see, the strategic situation is that you can't. You know, any inaccuracy you make will be magnified. There will be stories about it, how Hindus are liars, you know, how they do fake news and, you know, all these fancy new terms just to put you down as untrustworthy. So it is very necessary to be accurate and precise. Even then, of course, count on it that they will still try to misrepresent what you say and still try to blacken it somehow. Nevertheless, you're in a far better position to defend yourself if you have the truth on your side. So it's important to be precise about what exactly is the Hindu experience of mass slaughter.